Welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, on this very special Memorial Day edition of the show. I hope you all are having a wonderful Memorial Day. I hope you are spending it with your families and in remembrance. But we decided we wanted to come to you today, and we are talking about a very cool book, Lead Like an Ally, which we've been promoting on the show for a while now. And I'm joined by some wonderful guests. So we've got Ann Knapp with us from Global Mobility Solutions. How are you, Ann?
I'm great. Thanks, Ben. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How's your Memorial Day treating you?
It's quiet.
Quiet,
Okay.
distant,
Yeah. Yep.
uneventful. I feel like there's a lot of uneventful Memorial Days going on right now. So maybe people are actually going to tune in for this. Normally I'd have kind of a low standard there for a Memorial Day broadcast. But anyway, I thank you so much, Ann, for being here. Really appreciate it. Eddie Marx. Eddie is from New World Van Lines. How are you, Eddie?
I'm doing very well, Ben. Thank you very much.
How's your Memorial Day treating you?
It is the same as every day. It's like the pinky and the brain thing. What are you going to do every day, brain?
Same thing we do.
Stay at home and lower
day.
the curve.
There you go. There you go. And Eddie, where are you sitting today?
I'm actually in Denver. I bounced out of Chicago kind of when this whole thing was happening, and I'm staying in Denver for the summer with some family, which is quite lovely. So we rented a little home out here and spending some time with the in-laws. It's been great.
Nice. Wonderful. And we have Elena.
Hello.
Elena Anderson DeLay, co-founder at Ease Solutions. How are you, Elena?
I'm great.
And where in the world are you right now?
I am based in Rockville, Maryland right now, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Lovely. And how is your Memorial Day treating you?
It is very, like Ann's, very slow, very chill.
Chill.
I haven't started drinking yet, so.
Yeah. I might have a lovely Michigan IPA on deck here. But
Right.
but anyway, yeah, so everybody that's coming in right now, just kind of want to give everybody a couple minutes to check in here. Let's see how everybody's doing. If you are on Facebook, if you are on LinkedIn, if you are on YouTube, please go ahead and share, comment, get involved here. Let's see here. I want to make sure we are live. It looks like we
Hi,
are.
Anna.
Got Anna checking in. Hosea. Looking good here.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Shout out. Does Anna work with you, Ann?
Yeah, she's one of our global site managers. She's based in the Atlanta area.
Lovely. Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, we got folks coming in here. So there's Dano. What up, Dano? All right. Francine, it's good to see you. All right, wonderful. Well, kind of without further ado, the book is called Lead Like an Ally. It's by Julie Kratz. We also will have Julie Kratz on tomorrow. So we're going to talk about our takeaways from the book, and then we're going to have the author, Julie Kratz, on tomorrow. And she will kind of also talk a little bit about it. So if you've read the book and you want to ask the author anything, feel free to leave that in the comments as well. Also, please go ahead and ask us questions. We're going to have audience polls for you to get you involved and kind of hear your perspective on this. And please, let's make this interactive. That's, I think, how we all learn too, the best, right? So I kind of want to go around the horn here, kind of in the same order. And again, feel free to, this is kind of open, so feel free to just hop in. I mean, this is just like we're having a glass of wine talking about a book, in real life. But I do want to start with just, what was kind of one of your favorite parts, Anne?
The protagonist in the story, Jane, I just loved how she was approaching each new challenge. And, if you read the introduction, Julie based this on a number of stories that she's received over the years of women in the workplace and the different things that they've experienced and been through. And we all experience different things. And so it was really nice I enjoyed just seeing how Jane approached each new hurdle. And that there was a level of growth with each new hurdle, that she was just building upon the things that she had experienced and had learned and had encountered in her previous positions. So I always like to see growth in a character, and so
Yeah.
it was not lacking here. So it was good.
There was kind of like an arc,
Yeah.
you know, like where you get to see like the whole, like the character, like from graduating college all the way to basically dream job, the ups and the downs and the arounds, you know, that happen to people. And I thought that I thought the narrative was very engaging like that. I always love when they put things in terms of like a kind of a fictional parable, and, you know, allow you kind of read along that way and look through that lens. You know, Elena, what was your take on that?
Yeah, looking at with Jane's persona, I appreciate the self-awareness that she brought to every situation, just piggybacking on what Anne said, as well as just the courage to have those candid conversations that were referenced throughout the book, moments that were uncomfortable, but there were issues that bothered her, and moments where she was brave enough to have conversations that made her very uncomfortable, but there was an authenticity about her approach. In fact, she just said, this is an uncomfortable conversation, but I have an issue with X, or I feel this way. So she owned the moment and the situation and did something about it. She could have easily grumbled to her friends and just moved around to different jobs. So I appreciate that about the character.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is really important too. I mean, she took action, and I think that's really hard. You know, I think it's hard for any of us who, I mean, to be in that situation. I mean, it's you know, I think we've gone all identify with times where we didn't feel heard, or we didn't feel like we were getting a fair shake, and to go and actually say something or call people on behavior that might be disrespectful or counterproductive or whatever. You know, can be difficult. So I mean, I applaud the fact she took action. And in fact, there was a quote in there. I think after she had talked to, gosh, I want to say the guy was Robert. It was early in the story, kind of. And I kind of felt like it was a turning point, because it might have been like where she found her voice, you know, or like, to use a Lion King reference, like where she found her roar, you know, and she talked back and said, hey, you know, this happened and I didn't really, you know, care for it. And he was kind of taken aback. And you know, I think that was her first step, or her first time really asserting herself and getting someone to kind of change their behavior. And I think that laid the groundwork for a lot of the breakthroughs that she had later in the book. And she just kind of kept building on that success. But I think that's a really tough thing to do, you know. And I guess I would love to ask you both, you know, Elena and Anne, you know, how do you build that courage? How do you take that step?
You want to start, Anne, or?
Yeah, sure. It's not an easy step to take. I mean, really, there's a whole lot of history in the way women have kind of been conditioned, if you will. And overcoming that is very hard, because it not only does it take like belief in yourself, which is a lot easier to find, because that's where this desire to have those conversations starts, right? Like, I believe that this needs to be better and that we can do better, or this needs to be fixed, or we have that belief in ourselves. And it bubbles to the surface quicker the longer we have been in the workforce, I believe. But finding that courage to go in and sit across from a colleague or your boss or an executive at the company it's hard. And I don't really know what the answer is, because you just decide you have to do it, that not doing it isn't acceptable. Doing it is scary, but the alternative is far worse. And so you have to just kind of buck up and go in there and say your piece in a respectful manner, like she did all throughout the book. And then you leave and you want to, you know, maybe you need a drink, or maybe you might, need to like take a bunch of deep breaths, because it takes a lot of fortitude to go in there when we have, as a gender, been conditioned to not speak up and to just, deal with whatever the cards have been dealt, we're just to deal with them. And so it's hard. There's no good answer for how you do it. You just assume that that the inaction is something that you cannot live with, that you can get through this for 30 minutes of overcoming your fear. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say the phrase that I hated to read the most in this book.
Oh, I like this. I already like this.
It just kept getting repeated, and it kind of brought back past trauma for me. And it was, be patient.
Yeah,
I hate being told to be patient. And women are frequently told by other women to be patient, and time will change. Things will change with time. Your time will come. Your moment will happen. And from the very beginning, when Jane, the character was passed up for a promotion, she was told, that was the first time in the book when she was told to be patient. Mm-hmm. Be patient while someone else gets more money. Be patient while I lose income that I could build wealth in the future. Be patient while I lose opportunities to get exposure, to get leadership experience. Be patient. It was never accompanied with a measure of time. Like, be patient for 3 weeks. Be patient for the next 6 months. Right. It was just this ambiguous, be patient. Yeah. And I'm just sick and tired of people being, women, especially young women straight out of school, who really have raw talent, that maybe they need some cultivation, maybe they need a little bit more coaching. But when we tell them to be patient, that is like a hammer hitting a nail.
Is that like code for kind of like know your place, or kind of like code for don't get out of line?
Shut up, sit down.
Yeah. Well, okay, but now I'm gonna flip it, and so I love the fact that you went there, and I think they were using that be patient, like they kept throwing that out there, and I think it was cringe, like it was meant to make us kind of like cringe a little bit, right? But I'll be honest, as a person who's always been the youngest person at my level in every organization, I've been told throughout my entire career to be patient. Mm-hmm. By people who were 20 years older than me, who saw me coming, and they didn't want me to take their jobs, or they felt pressure from me, and so they told me to be patient. And in fact, to be honest, I didn't always have the skills necessary, and I'm still learning, But I mean, I've been told to be patient a lot too, and in fact, when I read this book, I find that there's a lot of things that were said to her that have been said to me too. And I didn't know how to react to that. Part of me wanted to say, this book made me very conflicted. Because I go into this book, I did this book because I want to promote allyship. I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable bringing their whole self to work, and that we can be who we are. And frankly, that's one of the reasons I dressed down today, to show, like, this is me on Memorial Day, y'all. Like, this is 100% me on Memorial Day. But at the same time, like, I felt like I identified with her a lot, to the point where it made me say, how much of this is a woman's issue? How much of this is an age issue? How much of this is a person who just isn't strong in these categories or areas and needs to develop? Because I felt like, now, I think I've probably had these conversations quite a bit less than Jane, So, but I don't know, that some of these things made me conflicted. Eddie, I haven't heard from you yet. I mean, what's your take on the book?
I could not agree with your comments more, Ben. It absolutely rang to me as well. A lot of the stuff when it came to being in the conference room and having the group conversations and the silencing of certain voices, that rung a bell with me. And I don't mean to take away from the gender issue on that by any means, but it just kind of shows bad behaviors are bad behaviors, you know, and it was the biggest point to me of the book that I enjoyed is what I share with Anne there with her confrontation with Robert. I shouldn't say confrontation, excuse me, when she met with Robert and reviewed what it was happening in their meetings and so on and so forth. And that to me has got to be one of the most challenging issues to approach, is how do you make a situation where you get someone to not be defensive when you are truly pointing out a default that they have, you know, a defect that they have, excuse me. So.
Yeah,
Elena, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, those are really, really great moments because I remember going back to Eddie's example, there are moments where she was given advice and feedback or told to be patient, but it came from a place of wisdom and a place of wanting to help. But by the time she heard it that time, it was already these defense mechanisms. And yes, that does happen. And I have heard it given in the context of millennials. Millennials get a bad rap in the workplace. They're ambition. They always want to move up really fast and not want to do it, but that's just perception. And it's also the outsider syndrome. I don't know if that's an official term, but whenever you're coming into a new environment, you have to realize that some people's first thought is, where do I fit now that this new dynamic person has entered the room? And that goes back to the individual that she worked with that seemed like a jerk. And then we realized after the conversation that he was just defensive. He was, his insecurities were exposed, or the reaction that she received was a result of his insecurities. And it was just because here, this person who is bold and secure in who they are, that, you know, now I don't know where my place is, even though we know her side of it in the book, and that she had to kind of build herself up, do the superwoman pose, talk to friends, get that level of support that allowed her to have the courage to walk into the room and own it. But others were defensive, and it just exposed just a lot of insecurities, and things were not resolved until it was that uncomfortable moment.
Are you talking about where she was the associate vice president reporting to the vice president of marketing, and it was the new guy that replaced her old ally, and he wouldn't look her in the eye, and it was very weird, and he would only talk to her in public places? You know, I read that caption, and I want to bring that comment up because I actually pulled it to the side, and I just want to read that passage because it was so insightful. So his response, she goes in and says, "Hey, what's up? Like, I want to build trust with you. We have to have trust in order to like be productive here, and you are not giving me trust." And he says, "Yeah, I know, but there's something else with everything going on in the media. I honestly do not know what to say or do right now. I am afraid of meeting one-on-one with you and other women because people might think something else is going on that would be harmful for both of our careers. I felt it was easier to meet in public spaces or with the door open." And then she says, or she thinks, "In my mind, I wanted to run away from this difficult topic. It struck a nerve. Men had been saying things like this casually, like it was okay not to meet with women. I would never think it was okay not to meet one-on-one with men. I would never get any work done." That is such an interesting exchange there that they have. And eventually, by talking about it, they break through it. And which is amazing, which I think is one of the biggest takeaways in the whole book, is like, confront it, talk about it, and move forward with strength and trust. But I think this is a real undercurrent issue here when men are dealing with, well, let's just say white men. When white men are dealing with issues of diversity and inclusion, it's very scary. It's like you're playing with a loaded gun. It feels like sometimes. And so I was always taught to not meet with women in my office with the door closed. That was like a rule I was given as a young supervisor. And that was, and yes, how do you have real trust building conversations or about sensitive topics or whatever with the door open? It's kind of a thing. It's a limiting thing. I also found it hard to sometimes ask coworkers to go to lunch with me, or I'd be turned down more frequently by women than I would by men. And so then you start to see like what she's saying about the happy hours, about kind of the boys clubs, about the things that start to form that exclude, various groups, right? Exclude people. And you don't want that to happen. But I guess what I was missing here was how do we fix that? How do we fix that? I'll leave it at that. Somebody.
I don't know how to fix that, because that is a pre, if you want to call it a pre-Me Too mentality, right? The advice that you got however long ago was
15 years ago,
right? And so I don't know how to fix that. I really don't. I think one of the ways that you fix that is by changing the culture of a company, and you get rid of the people who were causing the problems, right? That's the quickest way to eliminate the fear is to get rid of the bad behavior people, and I think you just need to kind of start to shift the behavior of the whole company, right? And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you go about doing all those things. It would be a long, arduous process, but it is incredibly important because everybody needs to feel safe at work, men and women of every of every makeup deserve to feel safe in the workplace. And whether that is a woman needing to confront a male boss, or a male boss needing to have a private conversation with a female who reports to him, everybody has to be able to have that safety. And I almost wish that they had touched on that a little bit more in this book, because it is more of a hot topic, if you will. But it's a valid concern for some folks. Again, I don't know how you go about fixing it other than starting to get rid of the people who maybe have HR has ignored for a long time because he, whatever the reasons are. I'm not going to get into the whole debate there, but
Right.
it's I think from the top down, a company has to reevaluate who they are and what they deem to be acceptable behavior. And if they want to continue to go down the good old boys club route, then people in the workplace, certain people are never going to feel safe there. But if they really want to change it, they have to holistically change it's got to be everything. And they have to enforce those changes. And that's, I think, a big first step, but it's a necessary one.
Elena, what are your thoughts?
It is. I think just acknowledging that things are not right is the first step, or something is not syncing well. What I like about this book is that at the end of each chapter, there was a list, a work plan of a place to start. Mm-hmm. There was comments about performance appraisals, or how managers should think, how recruitment should go, how workplaces can set up various groups for employees to just have a safe space to talk about issues, ways that leaders can lead to be more engaging and more authentic and more inclusive. I love how to conduct a meeting well, and really establishing ground rules up front and how decisions are made. So it's easy to read this book and just get overwhelmed, like, oh, there's just so much. Where do I start? But I found it very grounding at the end of each chapter. There's something that we can kind of take away and experiment with in each of our workplaces. And we can at least try. So no, we don't know where to start oftentimes, and it's often very overwhelming. But the point is to at least try. Don't just say, oh, that's an individual isolated incident. That's not systematic. That's not institutional.
Mhm.
And oftentimes when you start to address one factor, other things get uncovered. And so there were several times where there were other issues of ethnic diversity, there were other issues of ageism and access that were exposed just by bringing up the topic of women being part of the executive teams and women in leadership with the organization. So if you just try, you'll be able to find opportunities to improve it and just make a difference. It's not everything can be tracked to the bottom line, but eventually it's going to impact the organization's productivity and organization's ability to meet the needs of its clients.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, actually. And one of the ways I thought she put the author put a nice bow on this book was at the end. And I'm going to read a passage that kind of was the payoff for this whole story arc and kind of the business case for diversity and inclusion. Let me see if I can find it. She said, so this is at the end when she, and a total spoiler alert here, but when she becomes the, I guess the chief diversity and inclusion officer, I want to say was the title, which kind of, I guess, a dream job, or, you know. And she had some challenges even there when they hired someone in that level, which it was kind of surprising because it's like, okay, well, you went out and invested in this role, and then you get the report back, and you don't actually want to act on it, or you don't actually necessarily take action. But anyway, she gets through that, and they do it. And she says, a year into the program, we were at 95% participation rate. The bottom 5% were let go, which is also, by the way, side note, was something we should probably unpack. And that is when the momentum took off. We became known as the marketing agency in New York City to work for. I was also asked to speak at national diversity, equality, and inclusion conferences. When you become the employment brand of choice, and you get to pick whomever you want, the best and brightest in your industry, because everybody knows it's so amazing to work at X company, to me, that's like the best, because you get to pick a team of all-stars because everybody wants to work there. You get your pick. And so to me, like, that was the ultimate business case for diversity and inclusion. I mean, I've heard other good cases, but I never really thought of it in that term. So for me, that was interesting. Thoughts?
Yeah, to me, one thing that I thought was interesting about the book that I didn't take into perspective at all was the women mirroring men's attire as well as actions. That was a cringeworthy moment for me in the book, for sure. And it was something that I was completely unaware of. Ladies, do you have anything to give me some perception on that, some ideas? Or that was interesting to me, for sure.
It was cringeworthy for me too. There sometimes it could be the opposite, where women are asked to be extra feminine, 1920 style, where you have to wear pantyhose, you have to wear pumps, and have certain haircuts. And sometimes it's not written in the dress code, but it's very implied, especially amongst leadership. And there are still organizations that are like that. Oftentimes it's not even written or said, but it's embodied by leadership. And there's so many moments in this book where leadership gave cues to middle management and to those who were being recruited and hired by just not feeling as if you can bring your full self to the workplace. But I've personally experienced that. And even with the whole table tennis, like, you have to know how to play table tennis. You have to go out drinking after hours. That was a situation. And definitely with the character's personal life and feeling guilty about accepting a promotion that would put her above her husband. The societal pressures of supporting standard or old-fashioned gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. She mentioned something in there that I hadn't seen a statistic on, but I'd love to see a statistic on. But it was how like all her friends who had been promoted beyond their husband gotten divorced or something, and I was like, that sucks. Like that shouldn't be right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the need for the statistic there, Ben, because I'm not obviously saying it doesn't happen. I'm honestly very curious to see how often, that information would show you it to be based on however correct you think you can get, right? However accurate of a polling that you can get on that. But it is, we are expected, not just I shouldn't say we often are expected to dress a certain way, whether that's in boxy, very masculine suits, or to Elena's point, the 1950s Mad Men secretary look. We are expected to behave a certain way, right? A lot of dismissing of our attitudes when we are upset in the workplace as to how something is going on is that we're being hysterical females. We're over emotional. And that, again, all feeds back into the same thing, that there's a different set of expectations on us because of our gender. That's what this whole book is about. It's what this whole movement is about, is the different set of expectations that's placed on us because we're women. And, I have heard plenty of times in my career from different places, different people within any organization that I've worked for, that I was too emotional. I was too aggressive. I was deemed aggressive for demanding excellence, because I guess that's an emotion that you wouldn't expect from a woman. Those are things that we go through unfortunately, sometimes on a daily basis. And you can get up and leave and change your employment and do all those things. And I certainly have done that if I don't feel valued, but those behaviors are still out there for somebody else to deal with. Me leaving doesn't fix that. Like, they talk about exit interviews, right?
I was gonna say.
And all of that. Like, at some point you want to be like, yeah, this is why I'm leaving, right? This place stinks. Like, you hate women, whatever it is, like whatever you're angry about, you want to say it. But they point out in the book, like, what's the point? Like, their behavior isn't going to change because you left it on your way out the door. You said this, that, or the other thing. Like, you might feel better that you said your piece, and I probably would be in the say your piece category because I tend to do that. But it's not going to change anything. And that's why you're leaving, because behaviors don't change at that company, right?
And I think exit interview. You brought up a great point. Exit interviews, right? Because we all leave organizations for a reason, but how often do we actually tell that reason on the way out? Elena, what are your thoughts on exit interviews and how to conduct them, and should you be honest or not be honest? Because she said, what's the point? I may want to come back one day when they get it straightened out, or thoughts on that.
Well, first, I will respond to you as an HR professional in that they are very critical in assessing employee engagement and to ensure that, there are things that are not systematic happening with the departure.
Okay.
So I'm going to respond.
That's the HR hat. Okay.
Yes. Let me tell you what I have done and how I really feel about exit interviews is that they're underutilized. Mm-hmm. I think my last 2 departures, I just didn't do it because I felt like it wasn't the best use of my time. You should know why I'm leaving kind of attitude, because it's been expressed either in various meetings or performance reviews, or if the departure was related to lack of engagement. And so I definitely remember those departures versus departures that were either family related or personal. I do think I have not seen in my personal professional experience exit interviews really being treated as a valid metric. for the success of an organization. I have seen organizations sit back and say, yay, we have diversity. And like the example in the book where there was one company that had a very inclusive culture, but it started to regress into some bad habits. And you can tell that those exit interviews were not really given the proper weight that it needed. And that is a moment, that's the opportunity that's really missed across several industries, several organizations, that we don't take why people are leaving very seriously. There's research out there about how to make them more impactful, how to make them more reflective of what's really happening. And that's really adjusting your questions. So see if there's an incentive that would make the employee stay, see what the employee would recommend, the departing employee would recommend to the organization with how to improve it. Because with each departing employee an organization has, that is a potential ambassador for the brand, for the company. So you want to make sure that if departures or resignations are necessary, that it's done in a way that is supportive and that at least is human. So you just don't want this whole coalition of disgruntled employees that could really impact your clients and just certain perceptions about the brand.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point about being an ambassador, because as soon as I look at a company to go work there, I look, do I know anybody that works there currently, or do I know anybody that used to work there that can give me an idea, right? And what are they saying about you? And are they going on Glassdoor, which is also something everybody's checking before they go work somewhere. Let's be honest, right? So, I think that's great.
And she did that in the book. I mean, at the beginning
on the last.
I was just going to say, she was doing that at the beginning of the book too. She was, checking with those people who had worked at those other those two companies she had offers from to try to make a decision. I think, just to follow up on the exit interview thing, I think it's very easy for a company to dismiss what an outgoing employee is saying, because they're leaving because, it's the employee that's the problem, or the employee that has the issue. And that may be the case. It may be very specific to the family needs or whatnot of that employee, but it also may not be. And I think that, to Elena's point, you really should companies should put in more effort into asking better questions to get to the heart of the matter, and then seeing if that really is an ongoing issue within a company that needs to be addressed, so that it no longer becomes this thing that people are talking about outside of work once they've left that job.
Janet here asked a question. Do you all have mentors at work, same gender, same age? I think this is a great question, Janet. And this goes back to kind of, I think, how do you find the confidence to say something? And one thing that we kind of glossed over, we didn't actually touch on, Janet, thank you for bringing this up, is that she had people in her life, whether it was her mother or it was allies at work or it was a guy she was friends with in the past that they didn't work together, but someone who would kind of like give her that push to say, go for it. So I'm going to put this out here to y'all. Jenny, can you bring the question back up, please? Just so we can make sure we have it to read. Do y'all have mentors at work, same gender, same age? Go around the horn here. Anne?
Yeah, of course I do. I would have lost my marbles a long time ago if not for, those mentors. And, I use them, some within the company, some that I have known for years, of different, there are both men and women in what mentor roles in my life, of similar ages, older and younger than me. But I have used them to learn and grow. I use their input in issues that I'm running into, and how to best overcome it. I think that that opportunity to have mentors is invaluable, and I think everybody should have them. It really does help a lot just to have somebody listen to you, and give you a more unbiased opinion that you're going to get if you ask a friend or a spouse. These are people who know your work or know the situations within a company or within an industry. They can, well, they're your mentors because they probably like you to a certain extent. They can be far more unbiased, and I think that that's priceless. So yeah, I absolutely have them, and I rely on them.
Let me ask you, Anne, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Same gender, men, women, how does it skew?
It's both. It's about 50-50. Yeah, I mean,
It's a very convenient answer, Anne.
well, I mean, I have.
I'm just kidding.
I don't have a ton of mentors, right? So I don't want to make it sound like I have like 30 people that I'm going to on a regular basis.
Right.
There are a handful of people that if I probably broke it down, there's probably an extra woman and not a man. It's not a 50-50 split, maybe 60-40. But I think, it's important, like we were talking about earlier, to get a different perspective, that Robert was intimidated when she got hired because he was the outsider coming in. And, I think it's good to have a different perspective because it's not all about I should be in this job because I am a woman. I want to be in a job because of my skill set. I just don't want to be discounted because I'm a woman, right? So I need to check my experience levels and am I seeing things appropriately? And I feel like the more places you can get that from, the better, from sources that you truly trust and are truly in there to help you grow in your current role, in your entire career. So yeah, I mean, and again, some are older and there's a couple that are, a little bit younger. Because, as Elena mentioned, millennials get a bad rap. But I'm also a little stuck in my ways sometimes, right? And I am who I am. I know what my faults are. And sometimes, and in the case of those younger mentors, they're a little bit more brazen than I am. And, that helps with that kick to find courage to step out of your comfort zone. And so that's good too.
Elena, I'm going to ask you, but I want to answer first, if I may. I have a ton of mentors, and I think it is one of the reasons I've been so successful early in my life. I know it's pretentious, right? I'm counting myself as successful, but I feel like I've had a fair amount of success, and I think it's because I listen to all these people, and for some reason I've been so blessed that they've poured themselves into me, and it's just worked out well. But as I go and I take inventory of these people and what's the demographic on them, I mean, they're almost all men. They're almost all older than me. They're almost all white. I mean, there's a couple exceptions. But just to be completely 100% honest, and I think back on that, and I actually count Janet, as kind of a spiritual mentor for me. She encourages me daily, and we mentor each other. We have like kind of this reciprocal mentor relationship. But I think I wonder. I guess maybe it's on me to go seek out more women mentors to balance my kind of personal board of directors, like Paige Holden was saying last week, or I think it was, personal board of directors, because maybe I'm missing there. Elena, I wanted to allow you the next opportunity.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have mentors that look like me. And I would say now there are females of color that mentor me, but early in my career, they were older, they were male. There are a few that were uncomfortable to mentor me. There were a few who asked me, why would you want to have aspirations? Well, they didn't end up being my mentor, but when going out to seek opportunity, I had the same mindset as Jane in the book, in that I want to be mentored by the person who sits where I want to go. And that makes logical sense. And they can also talk to you about their pathways, different different experiences, and I just wanted that ability to learn. But I found it really hard to have someone wanting to just be honest and talk with me about it. And it wasn't because they didn't want to have closed door conversation. They were more interested in, why are you even interested in this field? Why are you even interested in doing that? That seems different from, it wasn't explicitly said, but it was definitely implied that that was not a Black thing to do. There aren't a lot of Black people in immigration or global mobility. Why would you want to? I'm just curious. And so probably I had a look on my face that expressed, disdain, and then it would, the individual will step back and say, "Oh no, I was just curious because I haven't met anyone like you in this field." So it's one of those things where I get it. There are layers to it. And then the one person that you find that is amazing has 10 other people that they're mentoring. Yeah. So it is a bandwidth challenge. And but it is something that you have to be conscious of. You have to be deliberate in doing. But sometimes, mentors tell you no. I like in the book that sometimes an antagonist or someone who seems to be against you can be an ally for you. They can be someone to hold the mirror and say, "Hey, this is happening. Why don't you correct a few things?" Almost like that frenemy per se that can support you. But throughout, you never know where your mentors are going to come from. But overall, it's going to be someone who authentically champions you and want you to be your very best self. Even when it seems like they're competing against you, they want to compete against you at your best and not hold you back or hold you down or discourage you. So my perception about who mentors are, because I've always looked older anyway, but oftentimes there have been younger professionals to coach and mentor me along the way, that it's been really, really helpful. And in the end, it's about getting outside of your own head and making sure that you have just practical advice and a sounding board.
I love that you brought up something that I want to ask you a follow-up question. Janet, can you bring that last comment up from ABA or whatever on YouTube, because I think that's a great question. I want to talk about this. But it does seem like, and Jane in the book brought this up, people mentor people that remind them of a young them. I've heard that, I've said that, I've seen that. That rang true to me. And they don't look at it like, well, you know what? Maybe this is two different perspectives. Maybe this is a perspective of a person who chooses to mentor someone who says, hey, so-and-so, you remind me of a young me. I think I could teach you a lot. Let's set some time up. Versus maybe a mentee who says, hey, you're sitting in the seat I want to sit in, regardless of if I look like you or if I'm from the same background or whatever. I would love it if you took some time to mentor me. And so maybe they're why people choose these relationships. But I mean, Elena, have you seen that? Have you seen that before? Where people, you remind me of a young me, so I want to take you under my wing and show you what it's like to.
I haven't had that directly. I have experienced, you remind me of my child. Or you remind me, or you remind me of my younger sister or a relative that reminds. So we're different, but I know we can work together. Or here's some things. I've had really off the wall comments regarding that, but unfortunately, it's just a missed opportunity because you don't know how that individual can complement you or give you insight. And we look at mentoring as just a one-way relationship. It's very two-way relationships. And you can receive from the person you're mentoring as well as the mentee receiving guidance and wisdom from you.
Does race or gender matter in the mentor-mentee relationship? That was one of the questions from YouTube. And YouTube's always an interesting place to get questions, but this is one of the questions on YouTube is if your mentors are capable, then what does the race or gender matter? And does it?
I'll jump in real quick on that. And
Go for it.
this whole topic is very interesting to me because of the fact that I kind of was doing my little personal inventory, and everybody who has mentored me in the past, Ben, I think we kind of share that, is older white guys, right? Cis hetero white guys. And that's a problem. And I think it's a problem because it lacks perspective, right? I can learn something from anybody. I have enough knowledge to know that you have to open up your world and have conversations and have different perspectives presented to you. And if you're not open to that, you're missing something that's pretty significant. There's a big, this is a huge country, a very diverse country in so many different ways, and you have to welcome those different bits of knowledge into your life and your daily behaviors.
So Eddie, how do you go out and, like, okay, now you realize this, boom, okay, opportunity. How do you attack that?
Well, it already has my wheels turning, Ben.
Right.
So I'm looking at it saying, okay, once we actually return to offices, I need to sit down, because we at New World's a woman-owned company, as is university, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely do have some very strong female leaders, but I've not really sat down with any of those to say, hey, I would like your guidance in some areas, and to do some weekly coaching or something of that nature. And it's same on the diversity spectrums. We do have some culturally diverse people on our leadership team as well. And I've not sat down and said, hey, I'd really love to sit down. So it's definitely making me want to broaden my horizons.
And can we, I want to hear Anne and Elena on this last question as well to Janet. Anne, Elena, in any particular order, what is your thought on the question about is race and gender important in mentors or not?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it is, and it is. We talked in the green room earlier, right, about the road analogy that they mention in the book here, right?
Right.
And imagine a road that's made and paved and maintained for a white male, and then imagine a road filled with potholes and whatnot that's paved for everybody else, right? And I mentioned in the room earlier that I think that there's a lot of different roads for different people, like different groups of people. My road as a white woman is different than that of what Elena has gone through, because she is culturally diverse in a way that I can't understand, right? I don't know what those challenges are that she has experienced. And so that's a different road that she's walked down. You can learn something from every single person that you interact with. And so it is incredibly important, in my opinion, that the people that you listen to, whether they are officially mentors or not, are diverse, and that you are understanding the journey that they have been on, and understanding to the extent that you can understand it, right? Because we'll never fully be able to understand any other person's journey. But it's important to see their perspective, because it can also, it can teach you different approaches to situations and subject matter in a way that you can't get from another person that's very similar to you. So I think that the diversity in who you're listening to is hugely important. And that I just don't think that you can just get that from the same type of person. If that type of person is just like you have to listen to everybody, and you have to listen to people who you don't agree with too, because you also need to know the other perspective, right? I have spent a lot of time, Ben asked me about male to female mentors in my group. Now it's very even. But when I started in the moving industry, I had my dad. My dad has always been my biggest ally and my biggest champion, and believed that I could do anything I set my mind to. But there are a lot of men in the industry who do not believe it. And so for a long time, I struggled with finding a mentor outside of my dad, that believed in me, that believed in something that I could do within a very old white male dominated industry. So I think that variety, it's the spice of life. It should be, what makes up your mentorship circle too.
Elena?
Yeah, I would say I've gone through cycles of that question, and I initially approached mentorship as just being a technical thing where, again, what position do you have? Do you mind speaking with a nervous intern or a new professional? Then after a few awkward moments, I went back and said, I really need to speak with someone who looks more like me or at least understands my experience. But then I would encounter someone who may have looked like me, but totally have a different worldview. And then you realize that they're still human beings with a lot of layers and different personalities with different perspectives. So I am an advocate for having more than one mentor based on your availability and that person's availability. Having someone mentor you both in your industry and someone mentoring you outside of your industry. Because sometimes having that external perspective where this isn't just, a global mobility situation, this is a broader topic, or your situation is shared amongst many other professionals similar to you. I have appreciated that, and I don't make assumptions based on appearances anymore. And that oftentimes when this conversation about gender and things like that, and when companies have structured mentorship programs, I don't necessarily want to be in the women only. I just want to be in the one where someone has something interesting to say or to share. It doesn't matter if it's a few steps or stages ahead of me in my career. I am thirsty for ideas. So my whole perception and expectation about mentorship has really broadened throughout my career. And so to answer that question, I'm in a position now where it's just so much more to look at other than gender and race.
Well said. To echo John Fernandez. John says, my road was Bay Area School of Hard Knocks, military and college, and leadership roles along the way prepared me for relocation and solid mentors along the way. John says, get around people that have your answer. Everyone has their own journey we can all learn from. John seems like a great guy. I've talked to John a couple times at ERC, and you get the benefit of working with him. Seems like a very good person to learn from. Thomas Bailey did a great video with him and Elena. I think you were in that one as well. So people, these comments keep coming from YouTube, right? Asking these questions kind of like that we may believe are self-evident. And I don't want to get into the weeds on necessarily the question, because I think we've kind of answered it. But I do want to acknowledge that this issue and this topic can make people defensive, as it did in the book, right? There was a percentage, I think, when she, in the final chapter, when she took over as the chief diversity and inclusion officer, and she was running this program, and she basically had 80% of people who were either, really on board or kind of on board, and 20% of people that just were like, I'm not doing it. And there were times reading this book that I also felt like, well, gosh, like, I don't know, like, I feel like I've heard a lot of the same things she's heard, and so I had to kind of like check myself too to understand, like, why is that reaction coming from me, and why am I being defensive? And I felt like, as I sat there and I pondered this, I felt like it was because I felt guilty for something that I didn't feel like I necessarily caused. But I also had to realize that I benefit from my white male privilege every single day. And I have an obligation to spread the love around a little bit and help other people to have some of the same access that I've had to opportunity. And I need to keep an open mind. And while I may not have caused, gender or racial inequality of opportunity in this country and the world, I do think we all have an obligation to try to rectify the gap. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this book. And I think it's still something that I'm personally working through. I think this is something that our understanding continues to evolve on. We're kind of at our hour here, and I wanted to thank everybody who's kind of chimed in, and who and Eddie and Ann and Elena, who have kind of come here and shared openly on this topic in order to kind of broaden our understanding. I'm very excited to talk to Julie tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to go around the horn in closing and just ask each of you for kind of a parting thought or takeaway that you might have had from this book. And Eddie, I'll start with you.
All right. First of all, that was a great little final monologue there, Ben. It gave me a little chills over here, man.
There's usually 1 good minute in an hour. That's usually my good minute. What you said was kind of demonstrating the beginnings of being woke, right? Where you're aware of your own privilege. But the book was made me think about things a lot deeper, and I appreciated it for that. And just the simple, like, emotional intelligence isn't necessarily enough. I think it's kind of broadening the idea of really needing to have conversations with different and diverse people in the workplace on multiple levels in order to really be able to move forward and make it a better work environment for everyone. So cool. Thank you. Ann?
It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's meant to be hard because it's a hard topic. And reading one book isn't going to solve it. We need allies. I mean, that's the whole title of the book, right? Is Lead Like an Ally. And so we need allies from all walks of life. And it's really hard. It's a very sensitive subject. It is very easy to become hyper defensive. I kept thinking throughout this whole book, how many times in all of our careers have we heard it's not personal, it's business, right? It's not personal, it's business. But when you need to talk to somebody about how they're treating you, that's not business, that is personal, because they're personally treating you a certain way. And that's where I think a lot of the hard conversations come in, because you don't want to come across like you're attacking somebody for the way they're behaving, but you also need to hold them accountable. And so it's the kind of the opposite. It is personal, it's not business. And we have to find a way to marry the two of them to get everybody to move forward. This is about everybody moving forward and reading more books like this and having these hard conversations and taking the hard steps. Because what was it, like 2080, there would be gender equality in the workplace? 2080? I mean, I know I'm going to have to work a long time.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I'm going to work for 101. So I think it's important to continue the conversation, right? To continue the education and the conversation, regardless of how hard they are, because the hard work is going to pay off for everybody in the long run. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ann. Elena?
This book illustrates how inclusion is so much harder than diversity when you are really trying to transform a workplace. It's one thing to get people in the building, but to make sure that they feel welcomed and that their ideas are heard. It takes addressing issues that are systemic and issues that are much more subtle than just having people in a room. And it takes courage, it takes caring to be an ally, caring about things that do not directly impact you, and really listening and being aware that even though I'm not going through that situation personally, that it still matters. It's a good mirror towards American society, where we have a very individualistic type of culture where other non-Western cultures are very collective. And in addressing this issue, we need to have a more collective mindset. Just because it's not bothering me, just because it's not hurting me, doesn't mean that it's not important.
Mhm.
And allyship is being able to speak up when it does not it does not impact me directly. It also does not affect things that I work with, but I still honor you by fighting your fight. And this is something that just takes individuals just reacting and pushing alongside their colleagues and alongside their peers on whatever issue. And each of us have something that a colleague has brought to us where we may have just stepped away and said, you know, not today, I'm busy. And how many moments have we said, not today, I'm busy, I'll get to it later. And there are ways that we can be better allies for each other just by championing something that isn't even related to us.
That's a great point, Elena. That I'm very convicted by what you just said, because as a white male, we are put in these situations not every day. I'm not gonna like blow it out of proportion, but weekly. Let's say weekly, where we're put in a situation where we're privileged to a conversation about where something is said that's out of hand, out of turn, you know, where we have an opportunity to set the record right and be an advocate, be an ally for people, and it's really hard. You know, it's really hard, you know, to put yourself out there and put, you know, to step out and say, like, I'm not okay with this, you know. That's really hard. And I guess so that, you know what, that's my takeaway, is that I have to have more courage, I think, when confronted with these opportunities to say something and speak out. So thank you for that. Thanks everybody for watching today. If you enjoyed this conversation, you will enjoy the conversation tomorrow. The book is Lead Like an Ally by, I never can hold this right. The book is Lead Like an Ally by Julie Kratz. She's going to be on tomorrow and sharing all sorts of really cool insights. And I would love it if you all checked in and left comments and questions. I'd love to ask a lot of the same stuff of her and see what she thought. So thanks everybody that bought the book. Thanks for everybody that discussed it. Thank you, Elena and Ann and Eddie and everybody that checked in today. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful Memorial Day, and I hope to see you all very soon, maybe in real life.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
And thanks, Janet.
Yes, thank you, Janet.
Love y'all.
Behind the scenes.
We'll see each other soon.
Can't wait.